on the Southern Arizona News Network, Cox Cable Channel 3.
In our Legal on 4 segment, joint tenancy, mixing assets like homes, bank accounts. There are big negatives that can come with a joint tenancy agreement. So if you're considering it, you should know the pros and the cons. And that's where legal affairs contributor Craig Wisdom comes in and helps us out. Okay, so you say it's a good idea for married couples.
Generally it is. Joint tenancy means you own something half with another person, and if one of you dies, it automatically goes to the survivor.
And that's a good idea because, first of all, you hear about probate. What exactly is that?
Probate is the process of transferring your estate onto your beneficiaries or your heirs. And while it's not as bad as you think, it's generally something, if you can avoid it easily and appropriately, it's a good idea.
Because it can take an extended period of time.
It can take extended time, charges some fees. That's the main drawback, is the money it costs. But for most husbands and wives, they own their property together anyway. It really is half theirs as community property. And if they die, they all automatically want it to go to the survivor.
What about if you own a business, you co-own a business?
Well, if you co-own a business, generally, unless you want a winner take all, survivor to take all, you probably wouldn't want that ownership with the right of survivorship, even if you each own half. Because if you own half the business and you die, you probably want your family to benefit from it.
From your share. So what would you do in that situation?
Generally, that could be what we call a tenancy in common, or depending on the nature of the business, they might just own half the shares of stock or half the LLC interest.
Describe tenancy in common.
It's the same as joint tenancy, except there's no right of survivorship. And so when you die, your half goes according to your will or according to the intestate
It's not
laws.
Automatically just, here you go.
Exactly.
To the person who's alive.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the other side, the flip side of it?
Well, people use joint tenancy where it gets a little trickier, and where they run into problems is, for instance, their children or other beneficiaries. They say, I'd like to avoid probate, so I'm going to put one of my kids' names on this account or this real estate.
And what do they assume, that everything will be automatically taken care of in that situation?
Yes, and in a sense it does skip probate, but there's a number of drawbacks and dangers. Even while they're alive, their child, first of all, kind of now owns that half that property, and if suddenly they start doing things you don't want, they can kind of run off with it or take their half of it.
Not a big deal if you just have one child?
Not too big a deal if you trust them, but even if you trust them, if they get sued, their creditors could reach that property. So you're really kind of exposing yourself in a number of ways by putting that property out there.
And exposing them, really.
Yes.
Because you can protect that part of their inheritance just simply by how you. So what should you do? Well,
it depends on the situation. Now, if it's a small checking account that you really don't care about, and it's fine, you know, to expose it to creditors because it's relatively small, it's not where most of your money is, can still be convenient. For other things, you either want just to let it go through a will, you know, depending on your family situation, if it's more complicated. You can always do something called POD, or pay on death, or TOD, transfer on death, which means it automatically goes to the person when you die, but they're not a co-owner while you're alive.
Okay.
So that avoids probate, but it doesn't give them any rights in it while you're alive.
So definitely, I mean, the will thing that you bring up. Should you go to an attorney, or can you do you can do these online too? What do you think?
Generally, I think you're much better served with an attorney.
What's the difference?
Well, the attorney's going to be able to point out if there are specific problems or issues you need to think about. Sometimes those forms can take care of you and such. Maybe 70% of the time everything will be fine, but it's a question of whether that's quite enough to cover everything.
All right. Thank you, Craig, so much.
You.
As always, interesting stuff. All right. For your money.